was summertime, and I remember my father and my brother taking me to the airport at the end of the leave, and my dad, who had been in World War II, shook my hand, said, "We'll see you in a year." My brother didn't say much of anything. I noticed that people were avoiding me, possibly because of the uniform. At that time, we were extremely unpopular. But again, you know, I knew what I had to do. Got on the plane and reported back to Fort Lewis, where I took basic training for shipment to Vietnam. Long story short, transported to Japan from Seattle Airport, Seattle Tacoma. Flew into Tokyo. The American crew got off. A Japanese crew got on because Americans wouldn't fly to Vietnam. And we were taken to Vietnam. My first view of Vietnam, my first impression of Vietnam was it would be a really beautiful country if it weren't for so many holes. You know, as you look down, you can see the bomb holes, the shell holes. And it was the steepest descent I had ever made in an airplane. It was straight down. Obviously, they were worried about sniper fire because you had an airport, but just outside the perimeter, people were taking pot shots at incoming planes. So the plane came in high and then dropped suddenly to avoid getting hit by fire. And they didn't tell us this. They just all of a sudden were sitting there and looking out the window, great country, and off the cliff. So they put us on the ground, made sure we got all, this is I should say, this is, we landed at Cam Ranh Bay. The processing into Vietnam, as any vet will tell you, was you did nothing. You made 3 formations a day. You got up in the morning, you had to make morning formation. They called off a bunch of names and units that they were assigned to, and if your name wasn't called, you went back to the barracks and waited. And then you came out for afternoon formation, and they called off a bunch of names, and if your name wasn't called, then you went back to the barracks and you waited. When they called your name, you had an evening formation as well, and sometimes people would wait a couple of days. I think I've talked to people who waited a week to get their name called, and they would say, okay, Big Red 1 or 1st Infantry Division, and they would call a bunch of names, and they called 1st Air Cavalry Division, and I heard my name. I said, okay, well, that's going to be my unit, which I thought was pretty cool because they had a really nice patch. I mean, you know, the yellow patch with the horse and the stripe and everything. Wow, that's cool, you know, I'm going to be the 1st Cav. Still knowing nothing about what I was getting into. I had seen war movies. To me, war was like the movies. It was, you know, I had no idea what it was like to get shot at. None. You know, it seemed to me that when I saw people being shot in the movies, they just fell down, you know, and then the scene went on, and I saw people shooting other people in the movies, and they all seemed okay about it. It wasn't that I was dumb. I mean, I wasn't dumb. It's the enormity of the experience is so hard to get your head around, you know, that it's almost impossible to do until it happens. And then it's like a light bulb goes on. So I went through this whole Cam Ranh Bay, and I got 3 hot meals a day, and I fell out in the morning. And I think once or twice I had to fill sandbags, which is, it's hard work, but you know, I was young, and I thought, this is not so bad. It's all right, you know. I mean, I can do my year doing this, and you know, little did I know that it wasn't going to be like this. So they called my name, and they put me in an airplane, and I flew up to the divisional headquarters of the 1st Air Cavalry, which was in An Khe, Vietnam. And they gave us, the group coming in, they gave us last minute training, you know, in country, how to stay alive. And they would send us out in the long grass and have us camouflage ourselves and have us hunt for camouflaged people. But they sent us out with unloaded weapons. So we were walking around with unloaded weapons. It still wasn't real because, you know, you don't have any bullets. So, you know, and they're all watching you very closely as if this is a training exercise. And I was at An Khe for about a week training, and then they called my name off as a replacement and they moved me forward. Now, this is the first time I'd ever been in a helicopter. I'd never been in a helicopter before. It was a Huey, troop transport helicopter, kind of the open doors where you see pictures of soldiers with their feet hanging out the side. I was one of those guys on the outside, though. I loved it. I mean, I thought it was great. The longer I was in Vietnam, the more I liked helicopters because when I was in a helicopter, the air was clean up there, and there was a downdraft from the helicopter blades, and you know, it was hot in Vietnam, and boy, that breeze, I would just sit with my feet hanging out of the helicopter and look up at the blades and just catch the breeze. And we were, you know, we were above shooting height, so it was safe. That was the key. It was the only time in Vietnam that I really felt safe was when I was in the air, when I was up and away from all the shooting on the ground. And in a way, it was the only time I could relax in Vietnam. Everything other than that, it was just always tense, always looking, always worrying, always alert, you know, but not understanding, not really, you know. I didn't sit down to think about this and analyze all this until much, much later after I came home. Okay, so got out to my unit in the field, and I got out there about 3 in the afternoon. The unit was on a fire base. Fire base is simply a temporary perimeter that's built so that you can move artillery around. It was very important in the kind of war we were fighting that you had support, artillery support, because a lot of the war was fought in and out of ambushes. You would be moving in a jungle or a rice paddy, and suddenly there was an ambush. And ambushes, by and large, the enemy soldiers far outnumbered you. Otherwise, they wouldn't spring an ambush if they were undermanned. They outnumbered you. And in some ways, I think that the strategy that we used, and I preface this with I think, my opinion from my readings, was that the infantry's job, one of the infantry's jobs, was to go out there and draw fire. Because when we went out there and we were ambushed, that meant that they could call for artillery support, they could call for aircraft support, ARA they called it. They could bring heavy fire to bear, and then they could count the bodies, which is really the way they measured whether we were winning or losing the war, was how many bodies were left on the field, on the battlefield. But in the meantime, between the time that we made contact and the time that they actually brought this heavy weaponry to bear, we were getting slaughtered out there. You know, we were outnumbered, we were outgunned, we were trapped in what's called a killing zone, and we had to fight our way out. So, but you know, we were expendable. We were soldiers.